In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talk for around the league. We're talking about teams like the Vancouver Canucks, St. Louis Blues, Toronto Maple Leafs, Vegas Golden Knights, as well as a potential deal between the Winnipeg Jets and Nashville Predators. We have several signings to discuss today as well, including Maccelli, Toropchenko, and a few other restricted free agents from around the NHL. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL signings to take a look at here today, and I want to take a look at some trade rumors here as well. The RFA signs have started to pick up as we're kind of inching closer now to many of the arbitration scheduled dates. Obviously, there's still some arbitration cases that are still a ways away, and we have a bunch of RFAs as well that are not yet eligible to have arbitration. That could drag on a little bit longer. So usually all the UFA stuff taken care of, and then you start getting into more of the RFAs with arbitration, and then the other RFAs that don't have ARB cases. Sometimes they have to wait a little bit. Just depends on what's going on with their teams and how much attention can be given to those negotiations. But we have a bunch more to talk about today. A couple of these come in late last night and the rest this morning and this afternoon. The St. Louis Blues have signed forward Alexei Toropchenko. He gets a 2-year contract extension at $1.25 million, so that's pretty decent value for him. He appeared in 69 games for the Blues last season, scoring 10 goals and 9 assists for 19 points. So he certainly played a decent bottom six role for St. Louis, decent production for that kind of money, very low risk. So that should be a pretty good team-friendly contract with that. Now, with that in mind, that will open up a potential buyout window for St. Louis as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit further into the video. We could see some other activity in St. Louis. A couple of signings in Arizona. As I mentioned yesterday, last night's video, there was word coming up from Kevin Weeks that the Coyotes were just putting the finishing touches on the contract for Matias Maccelli, but we didn't have all the final details. Now we do. It's a 3-year deal. His average annual value is $3.425. The breakdown of the contract as well is it's going to end up giving him a qualifying offer at the end of the 3 years of $4.25 million. He'll still be a restricted free agent. He gets $3.3 million in the first year, $3 million, $0.025 in the second year, and $4.25 in year 3. So obviously his qualifying offer will be based on his year 3 salary. So that's still decent value. If he can continue to put up the numbers like he did last year in his rookie year and continue to improve, now especially the Coyotes have added a little bit more talent to the team, and they will continue to do so over the next couple of years as more of their prospects make the jump to the NHL. That contract should be pretty team friendly, and he should be able to outperform that before he gets to the end of it, I would think for sure. The Coyotes today also announced that they've signed young goaltender Ivan Prosvetov as well. He gets a 1-year contract, $775 at the NHL level, $225 at the American Hockey League level, and a $300,000 total guarantee. So it's a 2-way deal. So he'll be paid $225 at the American Hockey League level, but he's guaranteed $300K overall, regardless if he's called up or not. So obviously, right now, Prosvetov probably sees mostly NHL action, but obviously the Coyotes could end up making other moves. We'll have to wait and see how he ends up finishing in training camp and where he ranks on their depth chart. But I would suspect he'll likely be in a position to play a decent amount of the NHL this coming season. The Minnesota Wild today also avoided arbitration with forward Brandon Duhaime. He signs a 1-year contract at $1.1 million. Last year, he scored 9 goals and put up 10 points in his 51 games played for Minnesota. The Ducks also signed one of their restricted free agents, and that's goaltender Lucas Dostal. He is a 23-year-old who's still trying to find a permanent full-time role in the NHL. I mean, you could say that he's the goalie of the future for them, and I would suspect this year he will be full-time in the NHL, and possibly, it's not far off from him being the starting goaltender. I do wonder what happens with John Gibson. I don't think this contract necessarily pushes Gibson out the door or anything like that, but there's been lots of rumors about Gibson wanting to be traded, and at this point, the Ducks have yet to be able to put that together for him. So I do think at this rate, unless he's moved, it's going to start this year with Gibson and Dostal and see where it goes. But it's a 2-year contract. The first year of the contract is 2-way, but I don't really see Dostal likely playing in the American Hockey League. If he does, he gets $775 at the NHL level and $325 at the American Hockey League level. The second year of it is a 1-way contract, $850,000. So it's still pretty good value. I think Dostal has a ton of potential to be the goalie of the future. the big question right now, like I said, it's just a matter of how long is Gibson with the team? When does Pat Verbeek finally find a way to move him along and honor his request to be traded? The Carolina Hurricanes also signed today one of their prospects from the 2023 NHL draft, Felix Auger. He gets his 3-year entry-level contract. So I'm not sure exactly what the plan is for him, where he's going to play next year. I suspect that there's still, likely that he may not play North America, but we'll have to wait and see where things go with him. But either way, very interesting looking prospect there. And a couple of former NHLers, actually one linked to Carolina, and that's Ondrej Kase, actually has signed to play over in Czechia. Kase has had the worst luck when it comes to injuries, many of which have been concussion related, which is certainly long-term a little bit, concerning, a little bit scary for sure. He's missed a couple of years where he's almost entire seasons or, a lot of time. He's probably missed as much time as he's played in some cases. Like last year, I believe he played opening night, got hurt, and was gone the rest of the year. He's had such a number of concussions that he needs to be careful of. I'm a little bit surprised, to be completely honest, that he's still playing, just because of the amount of severe ones that he's dealt with. But he's going to play in Czechia next year. Hopefully, I hope for his sake that he's healthy and that everything goes well for him and he can avoid any additional concussions down the road. And longtime NHL veteran defenseman Anton Stralman, not signing in the NHL this year. He is signed over to play in SHL in Sweden. So obviously a couple of longtime players. Moving on back to Europe. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot of different trade talk to take a look at here today, some of which is going to be triggered by some of the buyout windows that we will see here open up in the next little bit. Of course, once any team who has an RFA filed for arbitration, once all of their RFA business is taken care of, they will have a buyout window open up, which comes 3 days after the last contract signed, and they have a 48-hour window where they can buy out somebody. So that's what we just recently saw with the Philadelphia Flyers after the Noah Cates signing happened. They then a few days later had their window open up where they bought out Tony DeAngelo. So obviously that could happen again for some of these other teams. And I do wonder what it means for St. Louis. Now that Toropchenko has been signed, all of their RFA business is taken care of. Toropchenko was scheduled to be one of the first ARB cases, but of course, as we just talked about, he is now settled with the Blues and has his contract in place. So this week, they're going to have a buyout window. Now, they attempted to trade defenseman Torrey Krug, which we know, resulted in a potential huge trade that never quite came to be. It ended up happening with Kevin Hayes still getting moved, but there was supposed to be a much larger trade involved with Krug going to the Flyers, possibly Stanheim going to the Blues. There was a lot of other moving pieces that never ended up happening and had to be completely revisited and restructured because Torrey Krug would not waive his no-trade clause. Now, it's been no secret, many NHL insiders have said for some time that Doug Armstrong really wanted to change the dynamic of the Blues blue line in this offseason. That was one of his big objectives, was to shake things up back there. One of the veteran guys would likely be moving on. Krug being a prime candidate here, at 32 years old, at $6.5 million contract that he signed, hasn't exactly worked out for the best. I mean, it hasn't been the horrible. There's certainly been plenty of worse contracts around the league, but you can fairly say that they're not overly in love with that contract right now. And looking at their other options, whether it be Parayko, who's got even longer term on his contract, or Justin Falk, I think Krug is kind of the one that they circled at, trying to move off the books. Now, it doesn't really matter what Armstrong wants to do in the blue line for shaking things up. He's given them all a form of no trade protection or no move clause. So he's kind of handcuffed himself with being able to easily move one of them. And where they obviously tried to trade Krug and were not able to, I wonder if they'll revisit that in the next few days. I don't know if they'll talk to him about what teams he would consider going to or anything of that nature, but I do kind of wonder if they would explore a buyout since they'll have that opportunity. I know it would be expensive, but at the same time, there is some decent value. I'll show you from CapFriendly.com the buyout calculator for his contract, how it would work. Like I said, he's got 4 years at $6.5 million. According to the CapFriendly structure here, it doesn't show any signing bonuses, so there would be significant savings. In the first 2 years, it'd save over $6 million in cap space, and then they would save $4 million a year 3, $3 million a year 4, and then they'd have 4 additional years of dead money, obviously at 2.45. Now, 4 years down the road, the salary cap is going to be up a substantial amount compared to this today. You're looking at, probably $4 or $5 million this season for a while. We could be talking about a salary cap that's well over $100 million in 4 years' time. That's a real possibility. So, they may not be too worried about that, even though it's not really ideal to have dead money on the books for an extended period of time. I mean, they don't have a lot of opportunities to do these things. I do wonder if they'll take advantage. I would certainly give them some extra cap space that they might be able to do an additional move and change things up back there, maybe make a trade or, see what's left for free agents. There's not a lot out there, but there's still a few players that maybe are intriguing to them. So I do wonder what St. Louis is going to do. We'll have to watch them now that this Toropchenko contract's in place. The Canucks are another team to watch. They have way too many forwards like the Montreal Canadiens that we've talked about in recent days. They have as many as 16 NHL options at the forward position. And listening to a recent interview from head coach Rick Tocchet, it sounds like some younger players, which may not always be, slotted in as a sure spot. It sure sounds like he plans on having guys like Nils Hoglander or Vasily Podkolzin be in the lineup. And if they're going to be in the lineup, then that means there's even more veterans that could be facing being moved here. If you take a look down the list, though, unfortunately, I think what the problem here is they don't have a lot of forwards that really have a ton of value. I mean, their center position are pretty much set, and assuming they don't pull off a shocking trade and move JT Miller, which at this point would be challenging because he has a lot more control now that we're past July 1st. So it's very unlikely and pretty much not going to happen. So you've got your Pettersson and Miller being your top two centers. Obviously, their number 3, number 4 centers are pretty well set as well, but you have a tons of wingers. You've got your Besser and your Garland, your Kuzmenko, you got Hoglander, Paul Coles, you got Pearson coming back, Connor Garland. There's way too many. So clearly, a couple of these guys need to go. Looking at an article from Patrick Johnson just from a few days ago in the province, in a local paper in BC, he suggests it's likely to be Besser or Garland is the most likely ones to move, but to be honest, I don't think Besser's really going to be an option. We know that Brock Besser at one point wanted a trade. We heard earlier this offseason that he's rescinded that, and not only did he say he didn't want to be, he actually I believe the wording was that he really didn't want them to. He really wants to say it's not just a case of I'm willing to, it's I really want to. So it sounds like he wants to make it work in Vancouver. And to be honest, with what he's making for money, I just don't think that they can move that contract without retaining a bunch of money. And I don't think they really have interest to do that. So certainly that leaves Connor Garland as one of the few valuable winger contracts. I mean, there's been some talk about movement, but really considering things have kind of slowed down a little bit in the activity market, I do wonder what Vancouver's going to do. Because if they end up in training camp, they're going to end up with a lot fewer options to move some of these guys. As time goes on, you get more and more rosters that are pretty much set and filled and less likely to see activity for a little bit. So I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to end up risking putting a bunch of players through waivers, and I don't know if that's really anything they want to do as well. Speaking of potential, trades or buyouts, the Maple Leafs are another team to watch as well this week. We have another arm case that's scheduled for Friday. So we're within that 5-day mark of Ilya Samsonov's arbitration date. I would suspect the Leafs and Samsonov are going to do everything they can to get a deal done without going to arbitration. Nobody really wants to go down that road. It's an ugly process, and I'm sure they're going to work hard this week to get something signed, sealed, and delivered. So assuming they get a contract done in the next couple of days, again, once he's signed, they will get their second buyout window, just like St. Louis and Philadelphia before that. So the Maple Leafs could have a buyout window, like I said, within 3 days of getting the Samsonov contract done. So that could be this week, pushed into the weekend or next week, depending on what exact day they get the Samsonov deal in place. And that's going to determine the fate of Matt Murray. So I would suspect that if you don't see a Matt Murray trade, because we know that they don't want him on the roster, they know they don't want him or have plans to be in the team next year, they need to trade him and to move the full cap hit, or they could do this buyout. Now, I suspect right now that teams have been unwilling to take him without a big enough sweetener, and that's probably the issue that the Leafs are having. We've seen them do these moves before. They had to make a couple in recent years. They had to trade Peter Mrazek last year with a sweetener. A few years before that, they had to get rid of the Patrick Marleau contract, which included a first-round pick going to Carolina, which, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they used to take Seth Jarvis. That really backfired, but it was something that they had to do at the time. At the end of the day, they're probably in a situation where they don't really want to move out a high pick again to move Murray when they might have this buyout option. It's only 1 year left, so it's not like there's a ton of dead money for an extended time. They've done gone down that road before. So, but still, I mean, I still think a trade is preferential here. So we'll have to wait and see. If you don't see a Matt Murray trade, though, probably the next 2 or 3 days, then we're almost guaranteed to see the buyout, which will actually have a spin-off effect of helping the Ottawa Senators as well, because they have retained salary. That amount that they're paying will also drop, and I think it gives them about an extra $1 million in cap space, which they'll be thankful for. They're probably hoping the Leafs go down this road, and then we'll see. But depending on what Samsonov gets for a contract, they might still have to make other moves, because the Samsonov contract might be comparable to what they're going to see when a Murray buyout. For him to make a request of a $3 to $4 million contract, probably not unreasonable. And that's, they're looking at saving, I think it's between that $3 to $4 million mark on a Murray buyout. So at the end of the day here, we'll see that still the Leafs are not done moving things around, so they're going to be cap compliant in the fall. But a Murray trade and a Samsonov contract likely going to go hand in hand. Or a Murray buyout this week. So that's what we should expect from them here in a few days. Vegas is another team to watch as well. Another player that could be, I guess, a lot of questions around is Robin Lehner. What's going on with Robin Lehner? Nobody's really talked about him from an NHL reporter perspective, from a Vegas perspective, and national headliners. Nobody's mentioned anything about Lehner. We don't know if the man is even healthy, because that's going to determine all the options here. Because right now, Vegas has Aiden Hill, Logan Thompson, and Robin Lehner on their books for next year for goaltenders. Now, obviously, I think their preference would probably be to go with Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson. I still think they see Thompson as a goalie of the future for them. I mean, he's not super young, though. He's actually comparable in age to a guy like Hill. I mean, they could be a good tandem together because they're both in, just over their mid-20s here. So, if they can keep those guys together and they can keep playing well, that could be a good tandem for years to come in Vegas. But Lehner has a longer-term contract, still has lots of term left at $5 million a season. Now, he missed the entire year this year with multiple surgeries. He needed to have hip and shoulder surgery. Is he healthy? We don't know. Trading him would probably be extremely complicated, because there's no way a team's going to take on his cap hit without seeing him play. There's no way Vegas would be able to do that without retaining money, and I just don't know that they really are going to want to do that. Vegas so far has been able to avoid doing stuff like that. They need to get the full hit off the books, or they need to be able to put the full amount on long-term injured reserve. And because we haven't heard a lot about Lehner, I do wonder if they're concerned over his health. I mean, we may not hear much about this until training camp. It's difficult to say, but if he's not bought out or traded, then I suspect that means that he's not going to be able to play, and he's going to start the year at the very least on long-term injured reserve. But I mean, he missed an entire year unless, there's further surgeries, complications going. You would think he'd be at a point where he's getting close to being healthy, but that's a big question mark for them. We really don't know the status of that. I mean, they can't execute a buyout if they don't have a healthy player. So if he hasn't been cleared, which we haven't heard anything about, then we don't know. Now, they have Brett Howden, who was a restricted free agent with an arbitration case filed. His arbitration case is coming up not in too distant future either. So if once Brett Howden and the Golden Knights are settled on a contract, they will also get a second buyout window. Besides Robin Lehner, I don't know if they would really use it, and obviously can only use it on Lehner if he's healthy. So be curious to see what they do. Like contract could be on LTIR will have a major impact on their overall cap situation. Now, also, I want to take a look at the Jets and the Predators. We know Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg is another player that's been, highly watched here as a potential trade target all offseason. We know that going into the offseason, the Winnipeg Jets were expected to likely move Pierre-Luc Dubois, possibly Blake Wheeler. Those have happened. Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele are the other two. Hellebuyck's already made it clear he's not re-signing after his contract's up next year. So I suspect at some point he'll get dealt. We haven't heard much about him lately. Scheifele, on the other hand, has had his name mentioned a little bit more. That would be a lot easier trade to do. It's just a matter of, can Winnipeg get the right return? The latest intel I've seen was potential interest from the Nashville Predators, who are certainly under a new GM and Barry Trotz, who kind of retooling this team here. They moved out Matt Duchene with a buyout. They moved out Ryan Johansson with a retained salary trade. They signed Ryan O'Reilly. Could they bring in Mark Scheifele and have a brand new top two centerman? Obviously give them a whole different look and a whole different style of play with those two compared to the other guys that were there before. Now, one player that I do wonder that Winnipeg would be looking for in return would be a guy like Cody Glass. Now, Cody Glass is much younger than Scheifele. He's a Winnipeg native, so I'm sure, I know Winnipeg has a hard time getting people sometimes to want to play there and stay. I don't think that would be an issue for Cody Glass. So obviously he's only making $2.5 million, signing for a couple more years. Had a bit of a breakout season last year. Still, like I said, young and could grow with a lot of the younger players on that team. It might, take them back a step early on, though, depending on how quickly his development proceeds. But, not to say that it would be a one-for-one trade. I'm not suggesting it would be. But I do wonder, because those two teams have been connected before. There has been some speculation about some conversations that were going on before the draft. I do wonder if there's a potential there for those two teams to hook up. But we haven't heard a lot about the future of Scheifele. Usually when you don't hear much, sometimes that's an indication there's lots going on. The team is just doing a good job of keeping it quiet, keeping it away from the insiders to get the scoops, right? So we don't know what Scheifele is going to end up doing. He could end up staying. I just don't see the Winnipeg Jets wanting to go into this season with Scheifele and Hellebuyck both unsigned to extensions. I just don't see that playing out well in their favor. They can't risk losing both of these guys for nothing. And if they have a chance to make the playoffs next year, they're not going to want to shed a bunch of these players at the deadline. I mean, if they might have to, they don't have a choice. But at the same time, you got to think their value would be higher now to get something in return for the future instead of at the deadline. But hard to say where things go. I do think, though, that the Cody Glass, Scheifele potential trade is intriguing, though. So let me know what your thoughts are on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.